Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. And today I'm delighted to welcome Emma Stevens back on the show. She's got another book out, and we're gonna dive into that. And looking forward to this. The conversation that we had last year remains one of my favorites episodes. Like in terms of so. I'm going to put a link into that in the show notes, listeners. So if you want to check into that. Hello again. Great.
Hello, Simon. So good to be here. Thanks
Yeah.
for having me back.
Yeah. Well, how could I not? I mean, when I heard this book and The Fire was coming, and when I heard that it was on Audible, I thought great, because I only read when I'm on a beach. That I listen to great podcasts and great books like yours. And I think it's as we get busier and busier, the audible stuff is so important, because we can multitask. So the book starts in 93, listeners, and it is essentially when Emma reaches out for some therapy, and the therapist traps you. She pulls you into her web. She knows all the buttons to push. She's saying she's going to be the replacement for the mother that you'd never had, and then she's drawing you in, and then she's pushing you away. It's a very scary indictment of what a minority, I guess, of therapists can be like. But very disconcerting. Yeah,
it was to live that too, definitely.
Yeah, and you talk about spotting the red flags about the way that she behaves, what she does, this push pull stuff that she did, and yet you keep on going, because this is a long time ago. This is 1993. It's coming up 30 years before, and you said before we started recording how much you changed in those 30 years. So what was the moment when you realized, I've got to get out of this?
Well, there's a lot of story that leads up to that point, but I would have to say that it's the moment where I have had so many red flags, and if you think of putting them on a shelf, and you put one more, and that shelf just can't handle it, and it falls and crashes to the ground. And what I say happened with her is that she had these masks on as the super therapist, and the therapist that would lead me to enlightenment, be the mother I never had. Well, that mask started to slip, and she was showing me more and more of her true self, and which then began to parallel what I knew to be true of my adoptive mother. And my mother was very narcissistic and cruel and abusive. And so that's what this psychologist started to show me more and more of. And then when it became physical, and it became, there's a scene in the book where she slams me against a wall, and it never got beyond that physical, but it was a psychological torture of where she was saying these things to me, and it all came crashing into me that, oh my gosh, I have to get out of here as soon as possible. But even then, I stayed that night, because I knew I couldn't just say, oh, okay, we'll see you, I'm leaving, because I don't know what that would have brought, and I psychologically wasn't able to handle that. So I planned my escape all night long in my head. And when she went to work the next day is when I bolted and made sure that that was it, final. And at least I was away from her physically at that point.
Yeah. As I was reading this, I thought there's probably maybe three messages. So one, if the listeners are in this sort of relationship with their therapist or with somebody else, then this may pique their self-awareness and shatter the illusion that they may be in, because you were running through those red flags that they start very early in the book, but you just kept going until, as you say, the final straw, the final red flag appeared. So that's one thing in terms of awareness for the listeners. The second thing is for more, and I don't fit into that category, luckily, at the moment. What I did reflect on for me was, where's my equivalent? Where's my red flag? Instead of it being somebody else, it was actually for me in my feelings. It's an internal thing, right? An internal thing for me, in terms of, if I'm ever looking to value myself on, say, the number of listeners for the podcast, or if I am doubting myself and my desire to help others through the podcast, if I am feeling just struggling, and I'm just struggling with the way that I'm feeling, as to see that as a red flag to something going on within me, which is a feeling that's coming from a thought that I wouldn't choose. And I think, leading on from that, the most significant thing here is to see our own conditioning, because you said before we started recording that if this happened to you now, you would see the red flag straight away. But we're lost in our conditioning, aren't we?
Yes.
We're lost in our conditioning. We're lost in the programming that's happened from the day we were born, or the day we were relinquished, or we are programmed. Every person on this planet,
really, without knowing it.
Sorry, without knowing.
Yeah.
Without knowing it, this is a completely unconscious gathering up of all the stuff that we take on from the world around us. This is huge. This programming, we're kids that, as kids, we're sponges. The human brain is designed to learn from the world around it, to soak up information. It's like a sponge, so it's soaking up all the stuff from the world that's going on from the world around us, the good stuff and the bad stuff. We're soaking up from the behavior of others. We're obviously our parents, with our peers. When we go to school, we're soaking stuff up from our teachers. We're soaking up stuff from the world around us. Not only what they say, but what they do. And this whole conditioning or programming is veiling our true self. Right?
Definitely. And we've learned to adapt to what is it you want me to be? What are your expectations of me to allow me to even be here? And that could be adoptee related. I'm not sure if I'm an adoptee. I don't know anything else. But I know for me, I had to be so adaptable. And what that is also is a trauma response of fawning, where when I was in this situation, I wanted her to be the mother I never had. So there was the desire that she knew she could tap into with me. So she used that as an emotional hook to get me to buy off on that. And so every decision I made thereafter and what she did to me, I would be able to kind of ignore, even though the red flags were there, because she promised me my heart's desire on a silver platter. And that's how sociopaths do it, because there's always a kernel of truth. No one ever gets into a cult and says, I want to go join a cult, or I want someone to possess my mind. No one sets out to do that. But a person that has an agenda and wants to manipulate you, they know how to do it.
Yeah.
And when I met her, I knew nothing about therapeutic boundaries. So that was huge because she was a doctor. I trusted her. I was probably 31, 32 years old. And I had learned from my conditioning to respect doctors. That she's got a certification and she must know what she's doing. And so she says, I can call her anytime. Okay, I guess I can. She asked me to come over to her home, which happened to be right next door to mine. And so I thought, well, it must be okay. She's a doctor and she's telling me this is part of my therapy. So I trusted her.
Yeah. Well,
and
we trust people in authority. I mean, these therapist offices, they have the certificates on the wall, right? And they have the demeanor. I mean, you refer to her as this super therapist. So she's super slick. She's super expensive, and there's a value we associate value with prestige, and this kind of reinforces how much we take those people's at face value, right? I was brought up really honest, so I tend to be very well. I tend to take people at face value. And there's a few of our friends. There was a very few strange goings on with a guy who was in our kind of circle of friends, and everybody else spotted it but me. Right? Because I was brought up honest, I expect that from other people, and I've been taken for a ride by a few people, financially, actually. Yeah, not taken by a ride, not by therapists, but by marketing experts. They see that we they find out what we want, don't they?
Yes. Silver platter.
They find out what we want, and then they position themselves as the answer to those needs, and they suck us in.
And it's usually pretty slow and calculated. It's very insidious. It doesn't happen in the first meeting or even the second. It takes sometimes weeks, months, years to where they build up to where you don't even see it coming. And I know there are a lot of people out there that would read my book or other movies and things that depict this kind of situation, and they're watching it thinking, that would never happen to me. But you just don't know unless you're in that situation and you've been indoctrinated by someone and you think you have joined something you really want to join, only to find out later that it wasn't even what you thought. It can happen to anyone.
Yeah. And you said earlier on about, we're talking about the conditioning, the fact that you're an adoptee, I'm an adoptee, and what this conditioning, what this programming looks like. I don't think anybody's well, every person on this planet is conditioned, and we lose sight of that conditioning because we're so close to it. We're so close to our thoughts. We're so close to our feelings. We don't have any perspective. And I've done a lot of my work in terms of let's call it deconditioning, right?
Mm-hmm.
So seeing through how I was conditioned. I've done that work at depth amongst non-adoptees, and they have just a different variation of that conditioning too. And people, this, I would say, from in my experience, what I've seen is the central element of this is there's something wrong with me. There's something something wrong with me. I'm not good enough, and that every human being on the planet, I think, feels that to a lesser or greater extent. But with us adoptees, we've got cast iron proof,
right? Mm-hmm.
So that conditioning is like it's not just concrete, but it's concrete that's reinforced by steel running through it. We have, what was wrong with me? Why did, what? So for me, when I came out of the fog at 40, she didn't love me enough to keep me. Yeah. So I pushed my focus outside. She didn't love me enough to keep me, but the implicit message is, for me, there's something wrong with me, right? It's
right.
We internalize it, and that conditioning. We've been living with that conditioning for so long.
Well, maybe even in utero, because we were unwanted more than likely at that early point. So all of those hormones are pumping into the baby, in utero. So we've already formed that basically before we're even born.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's the point of relinquishment, where I was described as a sober baby, that I was observant and looked like I was in shock, because I can just imagine I was looking around the room thinking, where did the person or the matter that was always with me for 9 months, where is that now? And why am I alone? And I believe for me, that was when I started changing neurologically, biologically, developmentally, to my conditioning began.
Yeah. So this thing, conditioning, it's clearly big for us all, right? But especially big for us as adoptees. But before we started recording, you said that our conditioning isn't actually who we are. It's not our true self, right?
Right. Yes, I would say that's a true statement.
Yeah. So the conditioning stuff is then our feelings and thoughts that veil the truth of who we are. Our conditioning is a mixture of the stories we tell ourselves. Sorry, excuse me. The stories we tell ourselves, that feeling of not good enough, that feeling of insecurity, and that feeling of insecurity. Like I've gone looking for that.
Mm-hmm.
I've gone looking to therapists to solve that. I want rid of this feeling of there's a song. Help me forgive this feeling. I don't know who's that song. Help
I'm
me
not sure.
forgive that feeling of insecurity. I don't. But it's a Take That song. Help me forget these feelings of insecurity. And I don't, to my knowledge, none of the boys in Take That that wrote it. Gary Barlow that wrote the song. I don't think he was adopted. But so the conditioning it's got the feelings of insecurity. It's got the feeling of not being good enough. It's got all this stuff that's gathered up, which veils the truth of who we are, right?
Well, I think there's also the important thing of who we let other people tell us who we are, the stories they tell us based on who they want us or expect us to be. And we have to deal with that too, because if someone says of authority or parental says you are something, then you think, well, maybe I am that.
Yes.
And so maybe I better become that.
Yeah. So we're soaking up stuff we're soaking up what people say from the world around us, and we're seeing that as the truth, and we're taking on their opinions of us. We are taking on their demands of us. So this is the kind of what do they call it? The compliant adoptee.
Yes. Yes, compliant.
Not the person that acts out, but the person, the adoptee at the other end of the scale, who takes on does what he or she is asked of.
And that's a trauma response. You could actually say that's fawning also.
Fawning, yeah.
From fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. If it's your survival at hand and at stake, and if you need to fawn, then you will.
Fight, because there's the fight, flight. I've not heard that one. Fawn. The one that sometimes occurs to me is the freeze one.
Freeze.
Yeah. Fight, flight, fawn or freeze. So I'm overloaded. So this has happened to me. The freeze thing has happened to me in a social situation a few years, about 10 years ago, when everybody turned on me. I'd inadvertently upset somebody. I just asked them a question, and I triggered them, and I didn't know the person I was talking to, and I triggered them, and then they all started coming for me. Everybody said, "Why have you always do this? Why have you done this, Simon?"
Yeah.
I just asked a question.
Right.
This person.
It's very paralyzing.
It's very paralyzing. Yeah. So paralyzing. In that freeze. In that freeze moment, that's exactly how I felt. I froze. Right. I was paralyzed. So yeah, but the fawning is a new one on me, and I think perhaps a reaction that's very.
Well, it's actually, it could be the equivalent of people pleasing also, because you're being a little dishonest because you're just trying to please the person in order to survive.
Yeah.
And again, I think it'd be on the spectrum of, there's normal people pleasing that everyone does. But then when you get farther on that spectrum of fawning, then it could be where you're putting your own life in danger, which is where my book takes me.
Yeah.
In order to keep the connection to the person that's evil and trying to harm you, but you don't see it yet.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's a scary place to be in.
Yeah. And especially since my conditioning throughout my life led me to look at her as something that I could not live without. Yeah. Because she had put herself in that role of, I'm going to help you. I'm your salvation. And it took me a lot of self-reflection and a lot of research, education to finally break free from that hole of all of my conditioning. And I'll be doing that for all my life.
Yeah. Yeah. So in a sense, then, coming out of the fog is seeing through our conditioning.
I think so. Yes, I would agree with that.
So it's becoming aware of something that we were previously unaware of.
Mm-hmm. You've bought on us out. You've bought the idea, a philosophy of something, and you haven't tested it. And then one day you start to maybe let the light crack in or shine in, and you start to be willing to look at everything, be reflective, and see if that is truly what you think or not. And I have to do that on a daily basis on numerous topics, not just one topic, but kind of like life in general,
Yeah. And
to make sure I see things clearly.
yeah, and that's kind of what I was saying for the lesson I got from listening to your audiobook. It was, what are my red flags? What am I? What feelings or thoughts am I just ignoring or blowing past? And I think this is kind of in a nutshell. Would I choose to believe this thought? Would I choose to believe this thought? Would I choose to feel this way? And if I'm not choosing, if I wouldn't choose this, then it's not genuine. It's my conditioning choosing for me. Yeah.
Yes.
So I often mention my main mentor's book. I'm gonna put a link into the show notes to this, because that's what her book is all about. So the book is called "It's Not Your Fault Because You're Not Choosing."
Ooh,
Yeah,
I like that.
the subtitle, the title is not "It's Not Your Fault," and the subtitle is "Because You're Not Choosing." So most of the time, most of the people on planning, most of the time, most of the people on this planet are not choosing their thoughts, and they're not choosing their feeling. What is choosing for them is their conditioning. So it's that voice in the head from the past. It's that learned behavior. We've learned to fawn to survive.
Yes.
Yeah, we've
Yes.
learned to fit in. We've learned to. You mentioned this word, adapt, before we started recording. So we have adapted our behavior to fit in with what other people expect of us.
Yes, definitely. Remember when we talked about how in the first book, being addicted to our own way of thinking? This is it again. Because if we don't look at it and put it through tests and see if is that really what I think, are those my thoughts? Just like you were saying, would I choose this? Then you're just going status quo and being addicted to your own way of thinking and doing things based on, something that could be entirely incorrect.
Yeah, and that was the genius part that really landed for me in your first book, as you said, addicted to thought. And most of us are addicted. We think of addiction to behavior, right?
Right.
Or we think of alcohol, think of cigarettes. That's what we think of. And at a deeper level, we're addicted to the thoughts. And we, as adoptees, we're addicted to the thought that we're not good enough.
Oh, so good. Yes, exactly.
We're addicted to the thought that we're not good enough. And we go out, but we wouldn't choose that thought.
Right.
We've taken something from the world around us.
Input.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
we've taken other people's conditioning and taken it to heart,
Mm-hmm.
and made it our own.
Yeah, and believing that we have a broken story because other people in our environment are telling us so.
Yes. So this is the whole thing. Now, other people tell us so. So it's funny enough that we, because as adoptees, we all spot that other people's desire, when they tell us that we should be grateful.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, that particular thought doesn't, that conditioning doesn't land, and we kind of push back on that one. But there's a lot of thoughts that we don't, a lot of feelings that we don't push back on. And we go into these Facebook groups where everybody tells everybody else that they're not good enough, that they are their trauma, that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
nobody. This is all completely unconscious and completely involuntary. We're completely innocent of this stuff. We are living this stuff out without knowing it, right? We're not doing it on purpose.
Right. And a lot of this is pre-verbal, of like the implicit thoughts that we received that could be just completely wrong, but yet we believe it. And so then we let almost our personality form around the belief.
The personality forms around the belief. Yeah, the personality forms around the belief that there's something that's wrong with us.
Yes.
Personality forms around the conditioning that we should be grateful when we don't feel grateful. The personality, I heard this and I meant to write it down. I heard it on our podcast because you talked about mask, the super therapist.
Right.
She had a mask on, right?
Mm-hmm.
The word personality, I think I heard this on another podcast last week. It actually comes from the Latin word for mask.
Yeah, it does. I think I did know that.
Yeah. So our personality isn't who we are, right? We're not the story of ourselves in our head. We're not the story that we get about ourselves from the world around us. We're not the story in our head that tells us that we're not good enough. We're not our feelings of insecurity. We're not our thoughts, because all of these things are added to us. They're not innate. They're not essential. They're not in the true word meaning of the word. They are not our essence. Our essence is that consciousness, the spirit, the awareness, the space in which all these thoughts and feelings and stories occur. They're there with that one. The guy I'm name checking all the time at the moment, this Rupert Spira guy, he refers to the screen of awareness. The movie of our life plays out on the screen of our awareness, but the screen isn't damaged by the screen isn't the screen isn't damaged by the film. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does.
So another way of looking at this, perhaps a simpler metaphor, is one that the Buddhists use. They say that the dark clouds of our feelings, and the dark clouds of our dark feelings, the trauma, doesn't damage the sky. The clouds don't damage the sky; they veil the sky. They veil it. Yeah, they hide it. They hide the truth of who we are. So if we're to look at the cloud is our conditioning is like a huge cloud that blocks
enveloping
out,
us
and envelops us, but it just hides us,
right.
Doesn't change us.
I think that's where courage comes in, having the courage and the reflectiveness to know that the cloud's there, and the desire to see what's outside that cloud. What would happen if I removed myself from the cloud so I could see things more clearly? I'm speaking for myself, where I just had to clean my windshield and ask myself, what would I rather believe? I don't want to live in a broken story. Is that even true? And a lot of times I came out with, no, it's not true. It's just something I've always been told. And I have the choice, the free will to believe what I want to believe. And I feel like that's led me to a new path of freedom, of being able to have agency over my own life and decondition myself almost on a daily basis from, there are all kinds of, stimuli that are coming at us every day, more and more all the time, right? And you have to kind of keep on your toes to a certain extent to keep your windshield clean.
Yeah, they are coming. They are coming at us all the time. I think the word deconditioning is a great one, because, and the courage, the courage to do that. And so I think we're drawn to that. We are drawn to discovering who we truly are. So but it gets painful, right? So
a lot of people don't answer that call because it is painful.
It gets painful. So this is an analogy again from this guy Rupert Spira. So that we're like our false self is like a moth, right? And the moth is drawn to the flame, but as it gets to within a couple of inches of the flame, it gets hot.
Yes.
The moth gets hot, and the moth needs to go into the flame, but that moth will die. The false sense, the false sense of self, the personality will die, and the happiness will be revealed, but it gets painful. So I know,
awkward.
It gets hot, I do know an adoptee who went to a self-development event of this sort and didn't stay because it's so painful. When I went to see a therapist, one of the therapists that I saw, the idea of, she asked me why I wasn't where I was with my search for my birth mother, and I was gripped by the fear of my birth mother rejecting me again. So I went and I froze. I did that freezing. I went to that freeze stage. What's the? So I was paralyzed. Did you use the word paralyzed? Yeah,
I did.
I was paralyzed, and then something else came in straight after that. Some anger actually came in. I'm not gonna let this fear of the secondary rejection.
Mm,
Veiled my life anymore, and
right.
that kick-started my process to search again. So this conditioning thing is a big thing. So what are some of the things that have helped you see through that conditioning, Emma?
Oh gosh. Well, I would springboard off our first conversation where we talked about how I became an alcoholic after this whole episode with the psychologist, because I did take her to court, and that was over the span of maybe 4 years. And that was hard to be re-traumatized all the time by going to court, seeing her in court, and then still being married to a narcissist, having children who I love dearly, but then the marriage falling apart. So I started drinking more and more and more. And then about 7 years ago, my life came to a screeching halt where I was faced with choice, just like you were in that moment with your therapist. Am I going to remain frozen, or am I going to feel healthy anger about, no, I don't want fear to dictate my life anymore? And all of those feelings for me at that time, 7 years ago, it merged with sobriety. It merged with reconciling my dysfunctional upbringing, which was rather cult-like, and it, reconcile my failed marriage, the psychologist, who I thought who I was as a human being, and all of it was just a revelation. So I started researching, and then, yes, I had to find another counselor. I had to trust. I had to be open and honest and willing to be reflective if I was ever going to clear my windshield completely clear as much as I can at any given moment. Because like I said, we always have stuff on the windshield that's going to muck it up. But if we don't keep it clear, and we'll fall into some similar old familiar patterns. And I'm not saying that I'm infallible, because I do still make mistakes, and I'm willing and actually very excited to keep on that path of learning more and more, so I can stay deconditioned and dismantle all those erroneous past thoughts of where I lived in a broken story. I'm just not going to do it anymore. And that's my healthy anger.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're talking about lifelong stuff here, aren't we? Yeah.
Absolutely. It's where the joy is too. And it's where the sorrow is, and everything in between.
Yeah. So it's it's not a once and done thing.
No. I think we all know that, right?
I think we all know that. I tell you what, those people selling us stuff do, though. They all tell us it's once and done, don't they?
Yes, they do.
That's what the therapist did to you.
Oh yeah, to buy into it. I am going to make you well.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I talked about this last time we spoke, or it's something that I've heard before. I've learned since. So there's the journey to seeing who. There's the journey to seeing who we are, seeing this deconditioned self, and then there's seeing it for the first time, and then there's forgetting and remembering, forgetting, and remembering,
yes,
forgetting, and remembering. Yeah,
yes,
and that's what I got from listening to your book, was to, okay, so what are the red flags? What are the habits?
mm-hmm.
What are the habitual thoughts? The residue that still comes back. That still comes back.
Yeah, that's good. I think you do have to think that thought process and work its way backwards to see what was the initial thing, the initial hook that made me even to believe this to be true. Yeah, I think that's a pretty big thing.
Yeah.
To analyze.
Yeah. Wow. So I'm conscious of time. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Well, I did write the book for my own therapy, absolutely, and it was. And reading it on Audible was even another layer of being therapeutic. But I wrote it for other people that might not know about the therapeutic boundaries and what good therapy looks like and what bad therapy looks like. And just in case I could touch another individual out there that didn't actually know that, and they read my book and I could help them realize they're in a dangerous situation, because sociopathic people are in any venue, any career, they're everywhere. They're parents, they're teachers, they're professors, they're policemen, on and on, politicians.
Yeah.
And we just have to be careful and educate ourselves. Know that you can interview your therapist, and you don't have to pay them for that either, that time of trying to see if you have rapport, or if they seem like they want to talk just about themselves. That would be a red flag. But you just need to know before going in what those red flags may look like. And I think the awareness is key, so you can protect yourself.
Yeah, one of the, I interviewed a couple of therapists before I did I worked with one. And one of them, I said, well, can you tell me some past success stories, or words to that effect? And she said, well, it's all confidential. And I thought, I'm not asking for your name. I'm not asking for names.
Yeah.
And I said that I'm not asking for names. I just want to know. And she wouldn't answer that. And then I said, well, can you tell me a little bit about the process that we're going to work together, how we're going to work together? And she wouldn't answer that either. She dodged that.
Yeah.
So have some questions ready, listeners.
Definitely.
Have some questions, nice big open questions. And if they're not prepared to answer them, or give you what you believe to be valid reasons why they won't, and she couldn't explain the process, and she actually turned it back on me. Yeah, and I think that's called gaslighting, right? So
I do believe so.
I said, can you tell me a little bit about the process of how we're going to work together? And she made it like I was questioning her.
Well, that would show her defensiveness.
Yeah.
If she can't even tell you what her modalities of therapy are, that's essential for what you're purchasing.
Yeah. So, you can just do some Googling on this if no questions come to your mind.
The one I like, the one I like the most, Simon, is to ask them, do you have a therapist? Because every therapist should have a therapist. And if they can't accept that they might absolutely have things to work on, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
If they feel like they've got it all figured out, or anyone in your life that says they have it all figured out, run for the hills.
Yeah.
Because there are no gurus.
There are no gurus.
There are no gurus.
And I'm counting myself in there on this constant learning, lifelong. Have you got any suggestions of what we could call this episode of the podcast?
I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah. The reason I asked is because I think that line that you just used was pretty good. There are no gurus.
Oh, okay. Well, I kind of quoted someone named Janja Lalich. She's a cult expert. Can we add that?
Yeah.
That I did borrow that quote from her.
Yeah.
PhD.
Thank you very much, Emma. And thank you for listening, listeners.
Thank you, Simon.
You're a star. Thanks, listeners. Goodbye.